Hello, welcome back to my fave fanfics. Here, I post, well, my favorite fanfictions, if that wasn't obvious. I do hope you'll enjoy them as much as I do. Please like and subscribe for more content. Without further ado, let's get started.
Welcome, my dear faves, to the 6th part of What If My Hero Academia Reacts to Hunter x Hunter. Credit goes to makifinity. Chapter 8. Showdown X on X the airship. Now. Gon's voice shouted, as the four, Gon, Kahlua, Kurapika, and Leorio all let go of the web simultaneously. The applicants all dropped to the foggy bottom of the cliff, holding an egg in their hands. The strong updraft blew as Netero looked down, observing what would happen. The quartet were the first of the bunch to fly upwards, high in the air, as Menchi and Netero looked on. Nijire sighed, longing and airily. "I'm kinda seeing what they were talking about, that does look fun," she murmured. Tamaki looked between her and the screen, wincing as he felt queasy looking on. "Well, you can basically fly," Tamaki muttered next to her. She rolled her eyes before laughing brightly. "Tamaki, you can as well with your quirk if you wish to." Quote. "The joy of discovering something that tastes delicious," Menchi's voice said. She appeared once again before Todo. "I hope you got a little taste of it. We're risking our lives for that joy." Gon flashed a quick smile, an enthusiastic look on his face. Bright music played as text on the screen appeared. Showdown X on X the airship. Midoriya's eyebrows raised slightly at the title. Could the third phase be on the airship? He speculated. "I'd hope not, with how violent things have been, it could easily take a wrong turn," Momo frowned. The large blimp crossed the night sky, propelled forward by fans. After clearing the second phase of the exam, Gon and his friends fly through the starry sky toward the site of the third phase. Inside of the airship, the applicants stood gathered before Netero, and the other man from the beginning of the Hunter exam. "Allow me to properly introduce myself to the 42 remaining applicants. I am Netero, chairman of the selection committee for this year's Hunter exam," the elderly man said. The green man standing next to him with an optimistic look spoke next. "I am his secretary, Beans." "Beans, of course," Shinso snorted. "I don't know who I expected to be in charge of the whole Hunter exam thing, but he doesn't really fit the description," Siro muttered. "If no one's gonna say it, I will. I expected a complete badass," Jiru sniffed, crossing her arms and turning her head to the side. All Might, distracted by their conversation, shook his head and slightly chuckled at her words. "Originally, I had planned to make my appearance during the final phase of the exam, but since I'm already here," the applicants stood in silence, expressions serious, some seeming outright hostile. Netero's face shifted into a conniving look. "I'll accompany you for a while, and enjoy this nice edgy atmosphere." Kahlua yawned throughout his speech, Gon simply looking around with wide eyes. Netero let out a slow hearty laugh. "The tension is so thick, you could probably slice right through it," Gran Torino grunted. "It's been this tense from the beginning," Sir Night Eye said, remembering when the trio of Leorio, Gon, and Kurapika stepped out of the elevator. "It's only gotten worse as phases progress. We are scheduled to arrive at our destination at 8 a.m. tomorrow morning," Beans announced. "You'll find dinner waiting for you in the dining hall. You are also welcome to get some rest." A clock appeared, hour hand on 9. "Please feel free to do as you please until you are called." Kahlua immediately turned to Gon, a smile on his face. "All right, Gon. Let's explore the airship." Gon smiled widely. "Yeah. Quote. Oh, Thank God they're getting a break, Uraraka sighed. Those little shits are gonna spend the whole time running around and end up failing the next phase, Bakugo grumbled. Kurapika and Leorio watched as the two young boys immediately ran off. How can they have so much energy? Leorio questioned, watching after them. He hunched over, with his hands still buried in his pockets. I'm hitting the sack, he said sleepily. You can say that again, Kurapika sighed tiredly. However, I do have one concern. What's up? Leorio said, as the two walked towards the door to leave the area. How many more phases are there? Leorio stood straight. Oh. They've never mentioned that, have they? The taller said. It's like Todoroki said, they really didn't specify how many phases there are, Mina pondered. There's so many things they're being intentionally left in the dark about. Aizawa frowned as he thought to himself. The pro-hero despised facing situations blindly, always taking the time to step back and weigh his options before making a decision. On average, there are 5 to 6 phases, Tonpa said, stepping forward. The two turned around to face him. Which means we still have 3 or 4 to go, Leorio deduced. All the more reason to rest now, Kurapika added. They turned back around, continuing to take their leave. But you should be careful, Tonpa said forebodingly. Huh? Leorio said, turning slightly along with Kurapika, their attention captured. Twice's eyes squinted suspiciously at the screen. What a fraud. Mirio watched, lips pressed into a thin firm line. How can he ever hope to pass, when all he does is take his time to tear others down? The blonde thought to himself. The secretary only told us when we'd arrive at our destination, Tonpa said, holding out his hands. It's possible that the third phase could take place on this airship itself. And it doesn't necessarily mean we'll be contacted at 8 a.m. Leorio and Kurapika both turned around fully, with a varying level of alarm. Huh? Are you serious? Leorio said, mildly panicking. That does make sense, Kurapika said, putting a hand on his chin to think. Bakugo facepalmed, before loudly groaning and sliding down further in his seat. They're not seriously gonna listen to this jackass, are they? Quote. They haven't yet discovered Tonpa's untrustworthiness. All Might heavily sighed, a disapproving stare at the short man on the screen. Leorio's kinda expected at this point, but Kurapika? Shinso muttered. You might wake up to discover that the exam has already ended, Tonpa warned. He raised a finger before continuing. If you plan to make it to the next phase, don't let your guard down even on this airship. Leorio grunted a bit in displeasure. What the hell? Well, that was some good advice. Thanks, throwing up a hand, he waved bye before turning to leave. We will bear that in mind, Kurapika said, before turning and following Leorio. Let's all do our best. Tonpa called out after them, waving a hand, then turning. The moment his back faced away, a sneaky look crossed his face. So far, the exam's been very straightforward, a little vague, but they've never purposefully misled them. They said it was alright for them to rest, since they won't be needed until 8 a.m., Midoriya said. Yeah, right. Here's hoping that you're both nervous wrecks in the morning, the rookie crusher thought. Several doors were lined down a hallway. Inside of a room, Kurapika sat next to Leorio, still thinking. Several groans could be heard from the students. This shit's already pissing me off. He couldn't come up with anything better? Dabi thought, eye twitching slightly. I don't wish bad for others, but it wouldn't hurt that this guy totally bombs the third phase, Mina grumbled. I second that, Midnight drawled, half-heartedly rolling her eyes. There's no chance that the next phase will be held on the airship, the blonde thought. If that were their intention, they wouldn't have said that we were free to do as we pleased. They would have told us to stand by. A loud snore broke him out of his thoughts, and he turned to look at Leorio, who had already fallen asleep sitting, with a trail of drool seeping out of his mouth. Kurapika smiled gently. Well, I guess he didn't take Tonpa's words to heart after all, Sato Riley said. Ojiro snorted slightly, and a few soft laughs came from the class. Can't blame the guy, those phases would have wiped me right off my feet. Present Mike exclaimed. The scene switched to various dishes strewn across a table, some plates having been nearly cleared. Hey, how many applicants do you expect to make it through? Menchi said, where she was gathered along with Buhara and Satats. You mean pass the exam? Buhara asked her. Yep. We have an impressive group this year. Though I did fail them all at one point, she trailed off. Oh. They're here too. Uraraka exclaimed, blinking wide-eyed. Nedzu's ears flicked slightly, anticipating the answer to Menchi's question. But doesn't it depend on what the upcoming phases consist of? Buhara said. That's true, Menchi said, looking up from her dish. But did you notice it during the test? She reached over onto another plate. A couple of them had pretty powerful auras. Menchi took a bite, then turned to her right. What did you think, Satats? The man in question set down his utensils, speaking up. Well, yes, I like the rookies this year, he said, tilting his head. Auras? Hagakuri said questioningly. They're probably referring more to presence, I assume, Iida stated. Yeah, it's really noticeable when someone has a powerful aura, Tamaki said. Ever hyper-aware of the villains behind, stain and all for one's presence, powerful and deadly. Ah. So you agree? I think number 294 has a good shot, Menchi said. A headshot of Hanzo appeared, wearing the badge number 294. I'm partial to number 99, Satat said. A headshot of Kahlua appeared, wearing the badge number 99. He seems selfish and arrogant, Menchi commented. What do you think, Buhara? Quote. Hanzo's totally gonna pass. Exclamation mark. Kirishima encouraged. Selfish and arrogant? Kahlua? Suyu croaked at the description. Kid doesn't seem like the type to stick his neck out for others, Vlad King said, remembering Kahlua to leave Kurapika and Leorio behind in the Swindler's Swamp. But I wouldn't go as far to describe it that way. Well, the large man began. He isn't a rookie, but number 44 is the one I think will make it. A banjo strummed a quick rhythm. Hisoka's eye appeared in frame, a golden orb, half obscured by his hooded lid. I'm sure you noticed Menchi, but when number 255 was flipping out. I seriously want to know what this guy's deal is, Siro said, quirking an eyebrow. Something is definitely off in a way about him, Midoriya muttered. Everyone here's pushing to their limits to pass the phases, but judging by what we've seen of Hisoka so far, someone of his skill should have already had a hunter license if I'm not mistaken, the green-haired boy thought. A flashback appeared, to where Menchi had sat back on the chair after going off on Hanzo. Number 44 was exuding the coldest, most intense bloodlust, Buhara's voice said. The scene showed where Todo went rushed towards Menchi, outraged. And with a single strike, Buhara sent him flying. Of course, I noticed that, Menchi said. Hisoka stood amongst the applicants, who kept a safe circle around him. The atmosphere around him was darkened, standing to the side, his eyes closed with a cunning smile. He could barely control his bloodlust. Ooh, think he's as scary as Staney? Toga not so quietly whispered to Twice. Stain, an ear-shot away, tightened his jaw but kept his focus pinned on the screen ahead. Buhara, did you realize? Menchi asked, looking up at him. He was already that way from the first moment we appeared, Menchi told him. Really? Buhara said, looking a bit surprised. Menchi nodded her head wildly. Yeah, that's the real reason I was so edgy. He kept provoking me, Menchi revealed, her expression flattening out. Satats took a sip of tea, before speaking. An overwhelming presence of bloodlust, Nedzu repeated, expression unreadable. Provoking all right. Unleashing bloodlust so openly is nothing short of an invitation to battle, Aizawa thought. He was beginning to piece together the picture that Hisoka was presenting, and the image it presented was worrying. I had a quite similar experience. He should be carefully monitored, the reserved man said. He opened his eyes with a resolute look. Though it pains me to admit this, we are birds of a feather with him. However, his affinity for darkness is far stronger. Hisoka's clawed hand, holding 2 cards, propping them up ever so carefully onto the house of cards he was constructing. As hunters, we are continually seeking out worthy opponents. Ultimately, the hunter exam is but a place to find opponents worthy of respect. Is Hisoka taking the hunter exam just to fight and kill? Midoriya said, voice pitching at the end in slight horror. He was disqualified last year for attacking an examiner, openly attacked Satats without any remorse. Then he killed those other applicants in the forest, Momo said, the gears in her mind shifting. Kurapika did say how Hisoka didn't kill Gon because they were similar in their desire to fight, or something like that. Kirishima trailed off. It was silent for a few moments as everyone reached the conclusion of what it all meant. Seems like everyone must carefully watch their backs, Compress said, voice flat. Hisoka remained unmoving, his face partially obscured by the shadows of his room. And every once in a while, we encounter someone who surges forward, Satats continued with a cautious tone, his face becoming slightly distorted the closer he drew in. When we try to slow things down. An anomaly of sorts, he finished. Hisoka appeared once more, removing his hands from where he placed the 2 cards on top. The magician had a twisted smile on his face, as he gazed down upon his creation. Card upon card, was carefully stacked on top and near each other, a deep purple light cast upon them. The room was silent and dampened with a brewing unease as they watched the screen. Mirio's eyes darkened as he watched with frustrated anger. How can they let a killer roam so freely searching for his next victims? Single quote. Hisoka's eyes watched with razor-sharp interest. His hand reached over, and with 2 fingers he tipped over the top 2 cards, sending the rest tumbling one after the other in what appeared to be slow motion. The man's eyes crinkled even further, watching as they toppled, the last card to fall, the Joker card. Hisoka leaned back, his eyes slitting shut, the smile on his face seeming to grow wider. He let out a groan. Shigaraki's face twisted and he scoffed, while several of the teachers murmured their discontent. He certainly leaves a quite bitter taste in the mouth considering his odd behavior, Sir Night Eye said, pushing up his glasses to look in disgust. Kinky. Dabi said flatly, expression bone straight. The students sat stiffly, eyeing one another nervously. Eri worriedly looked back and forth from the screen to the upset adults. The small child wondered if she missed something. The blimp continued to travel in the air, the Hunters Association logo in large. Hey, brats! The voice of a man yelled, as crashing and cluttering could be heard through a closed door. Stay out of the kitchen, Quote, "The door at the end of the hallway flung open, and a chef held out both Kahlua and Gon by the neck of their shirts, each boy holding a drumstick. 'Go eat in the dining hall,' he scolded, before dropping them on the floor, slamming the door shut. But of course, they were finding every possible way to get in trouble." Children, recovery girl sighed lightheartedly, clicking her tongue. "They should be taking this time to fill up and rest," Aizawa spoke, watching the pair of boys. The soft lights of the blimp could be seen from the outside, as the boys walked down slowly through the halls, eating. Kahlua quickly noticed the large windows and the sight below. "Wow, awesome! Look, Gon!" the white-haired boy exclaimed, rushing over to the window. What is it?" Gon said excitedly, hurrying over to join where Kahlua was. The city below was decorated with lights, glimmering across for miles. "Whoa!" Gon expressed. "It's almost like they're jewels," Gon said, as the two of them plastered their hands and faces to the window, watching with childlike awe. A fond smile crossed many lips, watching the two boys getting along. "They've barely known each other for like a day, but I swear they're going to be the best friends to have ever been friends," Kaminari sniffled wetly. Shinso looked over to the blonde at the sound, before nodding his head in agreement. "Yeah," Kahlua agreed. The soft motors of the blimp could be heard whirring. "Hey, Kahlua, I was wondering," Gon began. The other inquired. They stood by the windowsill, still propped up to stare below. "Where are your mom and dad?" Gon asked. They're alive. Probably, Kahlua answered in a vague manner. "What do they do?" Gon asked, unfazed. "They're assassins," Kahlua said simply. "Probably?" Question mark. "Yeah, totally not concerning at all," Mina said sarcastically. Tokiyami could feel his feathers beginning to rustle, catching on to the end of Kalua's sentence. All Might frowned, wondering if he had misheard. Gon turned to look at Kahlua directly. "Huh? Both of them?" Kahlua turned to stare back at him, before laughing shortly, with a boyish smile. "That's your first reaction?" Kahlua laughed a bit more. "You really are a riot." Quote. A confused silence settled in. "Is he joking or?" Zero said, confused. Aizawa's eyebrows knitted together, unsure of what to make of the scene. "Huh?" Gon said, confused. Kahlua sat on the bench, one leg on each side. "You're the first person who's ever responded seriously like that," Kahlua told him, his elbow resting on the table. Gon sat next to him as well, both hands on the table. The bones from their quick meal laid there as well. "Well, you're telling the truth, right?" Gon said bluntly. "What makes you think that?" Kahlua asked, a careful yet questioning look on his face. "It's just a hunch," Gon said, staring back at Kahlua. "That's weird," Kahlua languidly said, shifting to rest his upper half down on the table. "I'm hoping the kid's a big fat liar if anything," Gran Torino said. Not to be a party pooper, but he said Gon's the first to react so seriously, either he's pretty consistent at keeping up a lie or midnight trailed off. "Assassins. This is finally getting interesting," Toga chimed in happily. "Part of my charm comes from never letting on if I'm serious or not," Kahlua said to Gon, who only hummed. The lights from the city drew farther away, as the blimp moved through the air leaving it behind. "I'm from a family of assassins." "They're all assassins," Kahlua revealed to him. A moment passed, breaths held. Aizawa's head bowed down, silently cursing to himself. Because why not, the man thought. Ida's eyes were wide, a bit horrified. What a terrible legacy to be passing down, he thought. It felt like a crude mockery of family lineages for something as evil as assassination to be carried down. Kahlua looked out the window, chin resting on his palm with a finger pointing, mind seeming to drift away, his reflection in the window staring back at him. "And my family has really high hopes for me, but I can't stand it," he explained. "Who wants to have their life planned out for them?" Quote. A distant look crossed over Todoroki's face, the words Kahlua seeming to shout and echo around his head. His father's hopes, no, crushing willpower to make him become Japan's #1 hero, through sweat, heavy fists, and tears, molded him into a tight box he barely had space to breathe in. The dual-quirked boy's eyebrows twitched slightly, creasing at the bitter thought. "They're going to make him an assassin as well?" Momo said, voice barely above a whisper. Bakugo's teeth gritted down, jaws clenching with the urge to hit something. The pale boy turned to Gon, eyes comically wide and defensive. "When I told them I wanted to decide my own future, they all flipped out. My mother had tears streaming down her face as she told me I have the potential to be a top assassin," Kahlua griped, holding out a hand with a sour look. A few remained frozen in their seats, struggling to take in the reveal. "Wow, a murder family sounds kinda cool," Toga said, a bit dazed. Gon laughed carefully, his eyes closed. "They're horrible parents, right? It's only natural their kid would go bad," he said. Kahlua closed his eyes and held his head up. "We ended up fighting. So I slashed my mother in the face, and stabbed my older brother in the side, and ran away from home," Kahlua declared. A few hissed in alarm, eyes widening. "What?" Mirio said, disturbed by the words that flowed so casually from the young boy. Sir Night Eye's eyes hardened slightly. If what he says holds true, practically maiming another may seem like child's play in the face of cold-blooded murder, the sidekick thought. Gon murmured a bit at the reveal. Kahlua put a hand on his chin again, a rather mischievous look on his face. "I'm sure they're stirred up right now. But if they find me, I'll send them packing," he said proudly. Gon could only laugh weakly. Kahlua stood to his feet, his arms out wide, an oddly cherubic look on his face as the background glimmered and shone. "When I become a hunter, I'll start by capturing my family. I'm sure they're worth some hefty bounties," he said dreamily. Gon could only share a forced smile in the background. At least he's doing the right thing in turning them in? Hagakure weakly said. Nedzu let out a short breath sigh. "I don't believe so. He's turning them in for bounties, meaning whoever sets the highest price, he'll turn them over to. I can imagine the reputation they might have earned as assassins." "Pretty sick, kid," Dabi thought, amused, a slight smirk on his face. Footsteps walked past, and Netero appeared, who noticed the two young boys seated near the windows of the airship, in conversation. The old man hummed inquiringly. He leaned in and his eyes blew open, his presence loud and challenging. Kahlua and Gon immediately turned to look in his direction, both standing, only to find no one there. "Is there something wrong?" Netero's voice said. They turned in the opposite direction, to find the elder approaching them slowly. "Pretty spry for an old fart," Bakugo mumbled, skeptically watching the scene. "Wait, he moved that quick?" Uraraka said questioningly. A few eyebrows were raised amongst the heroes, a bit surprised at the agility. His shoes clacked against the ground calmly, as both Kahlua and Gon stared at him, Kahlua sporting a more wary expression. He stood before them, blankly staring. Gon blinked once, then asked, "Mr. Netero, did you see anyone coming from that side?" He pointed to the hallway that Netero was just going through. No, Netero said with a shake of his head. Killua's eyes pierced into him, unfooled. When did he? The young boy thought. You're pretty fast for an old man, Killua spoke out to him. That boy's senses are keen for his age, definitely trained, all for one observed, realizing that Gon, whose natural senses were abnormally high, did not catch on. Only one who knew what they were looking for would sense Netero. That little trick? I barely moved, Netero casually told him. The boy's blue eyes locked onto Netero, who stared back at him, amber-colored eyes unflinching. Gon looked back and forth between the two, where tension was slowly filling the air. What do you want? You don't have to do anything until the final phase, right? Killua curtly said to him. No need to be so unkind. I got bored, and was looking for some companions, Netero said, his facial expressions revealing nothing. Talk about tense, Kirishima said lowly, watching the subtle face-off between the two. Why's Killua being so hostile? Mina quizzically said, confused at Killua's behavior. So far, Netero hadn't seemingly done anything to warrant such suspicion. Killua's eyes watched him carefully, analyzing. By the way, I meant to ask the two of you, Netero gently said, his eyes pinched close. Any thoughts on your first attempt at the hunter examination? Quote. It's fun. Gon enthusiastically responded, oblivious to Killua's suspicion. There haven't been any written exams, which I was dreading, the green-haired child voiced. Someone snorted loudly, before covering it up with a cough. I'm disappointed, I was expecting the exam to be far more difficult. I hope the next phase will be more entertaining, Killua said, staring down Netero to gauge his reaction. Well, now, I wouldn't know about that, Netero said abstracted ly, his eyes shifting to look away. An irritated look flickered across Killua's face for less than a second, before he turned around and loudly called, Let's go, Gon. Gon turned, slightly startled by the quick departure Killua was making. He's trying to get a reaction out of him, Vlad King observed. Little listeners given a pretty mean cold shoulder there. I don't think Netero meant any harm trying to scare them, Present Mike commented. Now wait just a moment, Netero called out. Killua stopped in his tracks, eyes shifting to his left to listen, while Gon turned back to the older man. Would you care to play a game with me? Netero offered. Killua turned his head slightly, listening. Game? Gon repeated. If you're able to defeat me, I shall let you be hunters. Netero proposed. Gon immediately sprung to life, his fists clenched. Really? I'll play. Quote. Is he serious? Sato said, eyes wide at the proposal. Whoa, they've gotta win. Kaminari said, excitement flooding his voice. Killua tentatively turned, eyes expressing distrust. How about it, Netero said, his eyes crinkling. I don't think they'll win, Tokiyami stated, closing his eyes. Several protests came from the students at his statement. Have a little more faith in them. Yeah, they might make it. Quote. Tokiyami may have a point, ribbit. It just seems too easy, skipping the rest of the phases and becoming hunters. He also didn't yet say what the game was going to be about, Suyu said. With the shit we've seen so far, I'm more concerned if this game is gonna be deadly or not, Bakugo spoke. His words brought concern to most of the audience, wondering if Gon and Killua had accidentally accepted an unsanctioned phase of the hunter exam. The blimp full of applicants traversed over plains, slowly making its way to the destination. A yellow ball with a single black stripe bounced on hardwood floor, 2-3 times, before bouncing high in the air of a room, landing on Netaro's index finger. The man had changed out of his traditional kimono, into a simple black tank top and sweatpants. He balanced on his right leg, his left foot carefully leaning on the ankle of his right leg. The two boys stood a few feet away from him, Kahlua with his hands buried in his pockets. He doesn't really seem that old like before, Juru said. Appearances can be deceiving. Aoyama chimed in. Are they going to play a ball game? Midoriya said, intently staring at the screen. Now, I'll go over the rules of the game. If you can take this ball away from me, before the airship reaches its destination, you win, Netaro told the two. They both turned to look at the clock in the room, with the hour hand on 11. I believe that we're scheduled for an 8 a.m. arrival? The ball spun rapidly on Netaro's finger as he continued. Well, that still gives you 9 hours. You're free to attack me however you'd like. I won't touch you, Netaro informed. Recovery Girl squinted, glaring at the screen. If those two boys expect to keep going through the exam, they should be sleeping like the rest of the contestants, not wasting what little energy they have. Quote. Sir Night Eye rubbed his chin. This game doesn't look worth it. If they end up not winning and spend all 9 hours that they should be using to rest, they might not even be able to get up for the next phase. Meaning automatic disqualification. Huh? That's too easy, Gon argued. You can't call that a game. Netaro appeared unconcerned by Gon's claim, keeping his eyes on the ball. Why not give it a try? He said, bouncing the ball on his finger. Kahlua remained collected and turned to fully face Netaro. We just had to take the ball? The boy confirmed. Getting a very strong foreshadowing feeling they're not going to get that ball, Spinner said. The simpler the task often means the harder the effort, Kurogiri added quietly. Yeah, Netaro responded, an eye peeped open, observing. Then I'll go first, he stated. Go right ahead, Netaro told him, his eyes shut. Kahlua had an impassive look on his face, as he began to move to his right. He walked past Gon, eyes focused on Netaro who stood near the middle of the room. He's messing with me, the blue-eyed boy thought, honed in on Netaro. He paced himself, walking ever so carefully and measured. His foot blurred, images trailing after. Tamaki blinked once before rapidly blinking, wondering if he was seeing double. A confused look crossed over the faces of many of the students, when they realized it wasn't their eyesight wavering. What's going on? Iida questioned. The teachers felt the same level of confusion. Afterimages, but how? All Might mumbled to himself. The former pro was familiar with it, usually a product of his speed exceeding what normal human eyesight could track. But Kahlua is still walking? Single quote. Afterimages of Kahlua floated behind him as he treaded. Gon watched in amazement, mouth agape as he blinked repeatedly. The figures of Kahlua continued to multiply and blur, as he walked around Netaro, who turned to watch Kahlua with a healthy amount of surprise. The afterimages of Kahlua became near-perfect copies of him, as they circled in on Netaro who watched the scene unfold, the ball still perfectly posed on his index finger. I see lots of Kahluas. Gon stated, eyes blown wide. Several watched in surprise, eyes wide and searching. I can't even tell where he is anymore, Midoriya said, his voice slightly above a whisper, enraptured by the screen. Now that is definitely a showstopper, Compress said with a lilt, finding himself honestly impressed. That skill certainly doesn't seem like a trick to simply impress others, Aizawa thought. his mind still burning with the fresh knowledge of what little they discover of Killua's background. Killua's ice-blue eyes were locked in on Netero, the multiple copies of him blurring and concealing his true position. Netero kept a cautious and all-too-knowing gaze on him. One of the assassination arts, he thought. Killua's footsteps were imperceptible to the ear, copies shadowing his step. The rhythm echo, practitioners use a carrying cadence of steps to create afterimages, entrancing the enemy, Netero pondered in his thoughts. Faint shadows of Killua followed after him, carrying the same sharp, unreadable look on his face. The atmosphere dropped once again, at Netero's words. "So, he's really serious," Mirio said, a tight, worried expression on his face. "Do you think he's killed anyone?" Momo said, her tone disbelieving her own words. "He's only Gon's age. Surely, his parents wouldn't make a child. They wouldn't make a 12-year-old do those types of things, so young. They must have some morals," Iida argued weakly, a heavy weight of anxiety and caution resting on his chest. "Even if he hasn't participated in any of his family's practices yet, it's clear that they're training him, and inevitably will ask him to," Sir Night-Eye thought, leaving this unspoken. The surrounding heroes followed the same line of thought, wishing it wasn't so but unable to dispute the evidence provided. "It's astonishing how such a young child has already mastered that technique," Netero mused. The copies of Killua had strengthened and multiplied, nearly blocking Netero's view completely outside of the circle, the young boy appearing to be everywhere, at once. Netero remained stone still. The copies walked continuously, until one stopped, and lunged forward, proving to be the true Killua. He came from Netero's right, swiping for the ball, but missed as the man swiftly stepped back. Fast, Kirishima thought, watching the encounter. "I do wonder how much exactly Netero knows," Nedzu quietly voiced his thoughts. A look of irritation crossed Killua's face before he pivoted on his heel, and spun back, grabbing for the ball, while Netero pushed himself back to avoid. Netero swerved and dodged as the young boy dove and performed kicks to knock the ball out of his hands. The old man jumped back as Killua fiercely followed, a hand outstretched just a few inches away. Netero ducked Killua's head under with a hand, jumping over him, the ball balanced on his foot. He dodged again, performing a handstand as the ball rested on his rear, with Killua a few feet away in a handstand as well, concentrated. "Oh, maybe not so easy," Mina said, wowed by Netero's slippery dodges. "He incorporates his entire body while he's dodging, not just his hands," Shinso thought, eyes following the screen. Gon watched with a bright open-mouthed smile, sighing in awe and excitement. Netero seemed to dance across the room, dodging the open-handed swipes Killua made, all the while balancing the ball between his neck and shoulders. The two flew into various air poses as Killua struggled to catch the ball. Killua landed gracefully on his feet, back turned, as Netero let the ball drop directly onto his index finger. "Damn it, he keeps darting around," Killua thought, frustrated, eyeing Netero from his position. "Is he really an old man?" Single quote. "Hey, he keeps it just out of reach every time Killua gets close. No way he's getting his hands on that ball anytime soon." "Serves him right, that little," Gran Torino harshly laughed out. "Killua is too stiff. Slippery opponents require even slippier offenses to catch them off guard," Ectoplasm said. "What? That's it?" Netero taunted, before throwing the ball up to playfully balance it on his face. Killua gritted his teeth. In that case, he briefly thought, before turning sharply and springing forward. His body leaned, a few inches from the ground, with his left leg reared back. I'll stop his movement. Single quote. Netero's eyes looked down upon him. Killua's leg came in fast, solidly impacting Netero's shin, the older letting out a grunt from the force. Ouch, right on his pivot leg. Gon said, wincing with an eye closed. Holy crap. I bet that absolutely feels like nothing, twice shouted, switching back and forth. Eri winced, her hands coming to cover her eyes. You think he actually got him? Ojiro said, doing his best to school his expression, face scrunching in sympathy at the hit. Killua smiled victoriously as he watched for Netero's painful reaction. Netero looked down at him, unblinking. Killua's smile seemed to freeze in place, his smug eyes changing to frenzied ones. The white-haired boy flung upwards, grabbing his ankle with both hands, yelling out, ouch, as he hopped around whining. Netero gruffly hummed, his left foot hanging in the air, the right leg that was struck by Killua, sturdy as wood. It is easy to assume that what an opponent exceeds in, such as speed and agility, makes up for a weakness. In this case Killua thought it would be strength. Some of the villains you may face can have both speed and physical power as strengths. Carefully gauge your opponent before guessing, so, Aizawa briefly lectured the students, as they groaned and hissed in empathy for Killua. He didn't hold back with that kick, Netero noticed to himself. If I were an ordinary person, that would have shattered my leg. He leaned in to better look at the young child. Killua stood, clutching his leg, teeth gritted with an eye open. Damn, his legs are hard as iron, he thought. Killua. Tag. Tag. Gon called behind him, waving his hand out. It's my turn. Quote. Izuku's eyebrows shot up, startled. Is Netero serious? Even with the help of some quirks, shattering a bone requires serious force. Old man's hiding something, Shigaraki huffed under his breath, subconsciously bringing up a hand to lightly scratch at his neck. Killua limped over, clapping Gon's hand that was held high in the air. Netero watched him, speculating. What will this kid try? Gon squatted and stretched side to side, extending his legs. He appears to be a very gentle and honest boy, Netero contemplated. Gon lifted his arms up and out, hands wide, before slapping them over his face. He removed them, expression serious as could be. Okay. The green-haired boy took a wide-legged stance, staring at Netero a few feet before him with his arms crossed, the ball on his head. I believe in Gon. He's been able to beat the odds so far, Kirishima said hopefully. He's a bit simple-minded, but maybe it'll be what helps him. Juru added. Gon braced himself, then leapt forward, as quick as a shot, determined smile on his face. Oh, he has a quick first step, Netero observed. But he'll need another 10 years before attacking me head-on, Netero thought, as he watched Gon advance in almost slow motion. I guess he is just a child, Netero concluded, with a steady gaze. Gon seemed to almost vanish as he shot into the air, Netero's head whipping upwards to follow his movement. Huh? From above? Netero thought with slight shock, expression startled. A few gasps were heard, some of the students sitting up taller in their seats, eyes transfixed. He's caught him off guard. Kaminari cheered. Gon was high in the air, the small smile on his face tinged with viciousness, as he stared at the ball. The moment abruptly ended as Gon slammed his head into the ceiling with a loud ding. Netero watched, like a deer caught in headlights. Half of the students jolted in their seats at the impact, wincing harshly. Oh fucking come on, Bakugo half sighed, rolling his eyes with a sneer, as he leaned back into his seat. Why the hell did I think that brat really would have won so easily, he thought. Overshot it, Powerloader weakly stated, fighting the urge to rub his head in the same spot Gon banged his. Maybe a bit too simple-minded, Jiru grumbled. The boy fell to the ground, clutching the back of his head as he mournfully whined, ouch. He writhed on the ground, emitting pain-filled whimpers. Idiot. We know that you can jump really high. Kahlua yelled at him, shaking his fist from where he was seated, upset. Netero watched, still stuck with shock. Control your strength. You wasted a chance. For a moment the old man let down his guard. Kahlua continued to scold, lips pouted, with his arms crossed. No kidding. Netero's sweat dropped, his eyes shifting to the side where Kahlua sat behind. A simple mistake really. The excitement must have gotten to him, All Might said, letting out a light laugh. Kahlua's got the eyes of a hawk. Maybe they just might win if they work together, Nijire said absent-mindedly. Gon sighed, a hand still rubbing the sore spot behind his head, before circling to the right, an optimistic look still on his face. He may appear simple-minded, but he clearly uses his head, Netero realized. I messed up. I messed up. Gon said to himself, with a sheepish look, his eyes still watching Netero. They should keep me entertained until morning, Netero thought to himself. The way he's talking, it seems those two don't stand a chance, Magna spoke. He seems to have underestimated Gon slightly, for how open the boy is. Although now, it'll be hard for another chance like that now that he's aware, Kurogiri said. The scene switched to a dark room filled with sleeping applicants who were either laying on the floor or sitting upright. Tonpa lay on the ground, sleeping. His eyes flickered open, before smirking. A door in the hallway opened, and out came Tonpa from the room of sleeping applicants. He walked down the hallway slowly, with a nasty expression on his face. Those two seemed pretty shaken up, he thought. This guy's ridiculous. To be so caught up in sabotaging others it wakes you up out of sleep, Midnight scoffed. Maybe this is his way of coping knowing that he can't pass the hunter exam. He leaves feeling accomplished that at least it wasn't only him that failed, Todoroki bluntly said. Ooh. Sick burn. Kaminari exclaimed. Todoroki turned to look at him, a frown twitching on his face. I didn't set anything on fire? Single quote. The man opened a door, grinning to himself as he looked around. I bet they're too nervous to get a wink of sleep, he chuckled to himself before turning his head and catching sight of Kurapika and Leorio. The two were covered with blankets, propped against the wall as they dozed away. They're sound asleep? Exclamation mark. Tonpa despaired, sweat dropping. Endeavor watched the scene with what could only be described as disgust. The weak are always finding ways to sink their claws on the strong and drag them down, he thought, his nose upturned, eyes cold and fiery at once. The hour hand of a clock rested on one. Grunts and exhausted panting from effort could be heard, as Kahlua and Gon's shirt and jacket respectively lay on the ground, with their badge numbers still attached. Gon stood off to the side, in his sweatshirt, hands on his knees as he panted. Kahlua sent two flying back kicks in Netero's direction, who ducked and dipped the hand holding the ball. Kahlua lunged again for the ball, as Netero casually threw the ball farther away. The boy collided with Netero's head, as the ball bounced off the wall and right back onto Netero's pointer finger, spinning. Gran Torino roared in laughter. It's like he's not even trying. Totes not fair. Hagakure whined slightly. They agreed. They should have known well enough that high prizes don't come with easy challenges, Netsu said, his eyes glimmering as he remembered facing off against Mina and Kaminari during the finals. Aizawa remained silent, the hour hand that rested on one flashing in his mind. If they gamble the entire night on playing this game and lose, they might never make it to the next phase, he thought, concerned. Netero turned back around, the ball positioned on his finger. Kahlua was hands and knees on the ground, clutching his nose. "You boys aren't getting anywhere," Netero said, eyeing Kahlua. "Why don't you attack me all at once?" Netero offered. Kahlua's eyes opened, filled with anger. "Why you?" he cried out, a tick mark near his temple as he flew at Netero. Gon stood by watching, hands still on his knees, before saying, "Okay, I'll get you this time." He launched himself towards Netero as well, with a confident gleam in his eyes. Vlad King raised a brow, watching Kahlua fly at Netero in rage. That's certainly a temper, maybe Menchi wasn't so far off, the blood hero thought, recalling her words of him being arrogant. "Come on. They've got this," Kirishima shouted, oblivious to the two different attitudes of the boys on screen. Netero avoided the two, bypassing Kahlua and shoving Gon's head directly to the floor, both of his feet off the ground. "Here they come," Netero chuckled in high spirits. He flung the ball out of Kahlua's near reach, soared over Gon's head, and maneuvered the ball on his leg while the two boys flailed around him. Netero exclaimed, laughing softly at Gon's stunned face and Kahlua's irritated one. "Mr. Netero hasn't even broken a sweat," Gon thought, while he stepped back to wipe the sweat off his face and catch his breath. "This may be a simple ball game, but it's apparent he's leagues ahead of them," Sir Night Eye said, watching Netero joyfully prance around on the screen. Mirio smiled widely, clenching a fist. "Wow, it certainly makes me want to join in," he said with an air of competitiveness. Once more, he shot directly towards Netero, delivering two quick kicks, which Netero swiftly dodged, then stepped away from Kahlua's fast attacks from behind him, slipping away just in time as the two boys both attacked. "Ouch!" they simultaneously cried out, as they smacked directly into each other, clutching their heads. Netero continued to softly laugh to himself, ball balanced on his head. "I guess a full frontal attack won't work," Gon contemplated. He turned on his heel and sprung at Netero again, coming in fast and focused. "Paw, it's hopeless." "Goo, Gon!" twice cried out. Recovery Girl huffed before speaking. "They're attacking at the same time, not together. No wonder he's dancing circles around them, when they're so uncoordinated." Quote, "Your attacks are getting dull," Netero voiced, looking at the younger, slightly amused. Gon's left leg came up for a kick, and Netero stepped back, only to get surprised as Gon's boot came off, smacking him directly on the chin, sending him flying back. Netero made a sound of surprise, as the ball fell out of his left hand, Gon's boot soaring in the air, his bare foot exposed. He kicked off his shoe to increase his range? Netero realized his eye on Gon as he flew back from the force. "Yes!" Mina cried out, practically jumping out of her seat. "A creative one, for sure," All for One thought, thinking back to when Gon had created the smokescreen of dirt when fighting Hisoka. Netero felt shock once more, realizing Kahlua was behind him, teeth gritted as he delivered a forceful kick from behind with a yell. Netero flew forward, the ball out of his hands. "It's our chance!" Kahlua shouted, as he dove for the ball with two hands, eyes shining. "I think not," Netero chimed, before flipping his body around in mid-air to kick the ball out of Kahlua's reach. "Oh!" the boy exclaimed, smile dropping. "They're so close. Iida said, his calves tensed. "Oh come on," Ciro said loudly. Netero landed on his feet from the backflip, vaulting forward immediately to grab the ball. Gon's other boot came flying in, sending the ball even further out of Netero's reach, who cried out in surprise. "You and your little tricks," Netero shouted, face contorting. Gon and Kahlua passed him from both left and right, catching up with the ball, each with an arm outstretched. "It's ours," they cried out together, eyes full of victory. Majority of the class cried out victoriously as Gon pushed the ball back even further. If they even so much as touch it, they both win and become hunters. Uraraka said, her eyes shining as she leaned forward. Netero's demeanor intensified, as he rocketed from the ground, Gon and Kahlua both oblivious. The older man sped in, arms outstretched, as he shot like a bullet between the two, knocking them out of the way and grabbing the ball. Kahlua looked at him in mid-fall, expression outraged. Netero came back to solid ground, sliding the ball and his right leg on the floor as he came to a stop. The two landed roughly, grunting as their backs hit the hard floor. A scandalized look crossed Kirishima's face, the bright smile moments ago falling to pieces. "What the hell?" Bakugo yelled, an angry expression over his face. "Ah!" Toga whined, her arms that were raised high flopping back down to her sides. Dabi grunted, falling a bit back in his seat, refusing to admit to himself he was a little disappointed. Netero stood again, posing as when they first started, the ball balancing on his index finger, while his left leg balanced on his right ankle. Gon looked at him, mouth open, while Kahlua's eyes were beyond vexed. "I commend you on your efforts," Netero calmly praised. Gon broke out into a smile. "You're amazing, mister." Netero. A spot of the ground was burned black, smoke rising off of it. Kahlua looked at it, irate. "Really amazing," Gon admitted. "Gon's one of a kind. I don't think I could be happy after how close I was to winning," Sato sighed. "Kahlua is certainly not," Suyu noted, watching the pale boy's increasingly dark expressions. Netero remained silent at that, eyes closed. Kahlua had his attention back on the older, with a heated look of displeasure. He closed his eyes, then slowly stood to his feet. "I'm done," Kahlua said nonchalantly, his face cool and composed as before. "I give up. I lose," he announced loudly, Gon looking in his direction. "Huh? Quote. Oh? He's quitting?" Netero thought, flicking an eye open. Gon stood up. "Why?" "We still have time," Gon said, pointing at the clock, the hour hand on 2. "And we just came really close." 2 o'clock? "It's getting late," Momo said, a finger on her lip. Catfaces realized it. "They're not gonna win," Bakugo said, eyebrows pinched. It was silent for a moment, before muffled snickering could be heard. "Catface?" Bakugo whipped around, fire in his eyes. "Dunce face, shut the hell up." Quote. Kahlua grabbed his shirt off of the floor. "Man. You really have no clue, do you?" Kahlua replied, his face blank. Gon hummed in question. The old man barely used his right hand in his left leg, Kahlua pointed out. "What?" Gon said, eyes turning to saucers. "And we're still powerless against him. We could chase him around for a year, and never get the ball from him," Kahlua stated. Gon turned back to look at Netero, who had his right hand on his hip, the left holding the ball. Netero's been holding back, and that mark on the ground turned black from how fast he was moving. "It literally caught on fire," Midnight stated. "It's best they play it safe so they don't lose the next phase," Present Mike added. "Oh, you saw that? I thought I'd fooled you," Netero said aloud. "So that's what he was doing," Gon mentioned. Kahlua, who was now at the doorway, forcefully laughed, smile bitter. "You really know how to piss me off, old man," Kahlua said. He turned, leaving down the hallway. "Come on, Gon." Quote. Getting the feeling that Kahlua might be a sore loser, someone whispered carefully. "Oh, I'm gonna play a little longer." Kahlua stuck his head back in, yelling out, "Huh?" Quote. "Didn't you hear what I said?" Exclamation mark. "It's useless. You won't be able to take the ball from him." Kahlua hissed, looking annoyed. "Yeah. I don't care about the ball anymore," Gon responded enthusiastically. Killua's face slacked, confused. "We've only used up half of the time limit. I'm gonna make Mr. Netero use his right hand before the time runs out," Gon explained. Netero listened in, emotionless. "What a determined spirit," All Might said. "Stubborn. Takes one to know one," Aizawa said, glaring daggers at the former pro-hero now withering in his seat. Izuku adamantly kept his eyes away from the two, lest his teacher's rage turned on him too. Killua's eye twitched, face caught between confusion and awkward disbelief as he stared at Gon. Okay, he mumbled. "Yeah, I got it. Good luck." Kahlua turned around, half-heartedly waving a hand behind him. "I'm going to go get some sleep." The door shut softly behind him as he left. "Hey, Mr. Netero," Gon began. Netero responded. "How did Kahlua do that thing where he walked slowly and it looked like there were a bunch of him?" Gon asked the man who had come to stand right beside him. Netero continued to watch the door, expression flat. Compress's eyes closed, face impassionate as he listened carefully, wondering if Netero would reveal anything more. "Oh!" Izuku exclaimed lightly, before opening his notebook to write down "Rhythm Echo," before the name slipped from his mind. "That technique is for those engaged in shady underground work. You have no need to learn it. In fact, you should never learn it," Netero told him. "But it's an amazing technique, right?" Gon pushed. Netero looked down at the ball in his hand, bouncing it up in the air. "It requires an intensive amount of training," he vaguely said. Gon turned back to look at the door where Kahlua left through. "Killua is amazing," Gon gushed. Gon doesn't understand the weight of what Netero means, Nedzu thought. Dabi caught the tone of Netero's last words. "Intensive training, huh?" he mumbled, the remains of what skin he could feel, growing hot. It was silent for a moment, as Gon's eyes turned to slits, eyeing the ball in Netero's hand, before quickly swiping. "Too easy," Netero chided, pulling it just out of his reach. Gon's sweat dropped, a guilty smile on his face. "Worth the shot." Aoyama gleamed. The inside of the hallway was lit with a soft bright light that could be seen outside as two people approached from the right, one from the left. Two applicants, with hands in their pockets, walked down the hallway. Killua's shoes could be seen as he walked in their direction. "Damn it. Now I'm in a bad mood," Kahlua internally cursed. Both of his shirts were off, held under his left elbow, leaving him bare-chested. Walking past, one of the applicants bumped directly into him. "He said he's only 12? Exclamation mark. Ojiro gawked, looking at the sharp and hard edges of Killua's abs. Ojiro had joined his local community's dojo around 7, and it hadn't been until he joined UA and his training had become much more intense. His abs had become so defined. "What's with people bumping into each other?" Mineta said. The boy's head tilted downwards, obscuring his eyes. his mouth a flat line across his face, brooding. "Oh well, there's nothing I can do," he thought. "Hey. Hold on kid," a voice called out. The two applicants that had just walked past stopped in the hallway, turned around to look at Kilua's back who was still retreating. "You bump into us and then you ignore us?" The one in blue incited. "Bastard." They both yelled out, when realizing that Kilua had not even hesitated in the slightest, rushing towards him. "Seriously? They're going to gang up on him for that?" Kirishima said, a worried expression on his face. "Cowards don't need much of a reason to gang on others," Bakugo said lowly, his eyes shifting to the ground. Their figures could be seen from the outside of the blimp, catching up with Kilua, both laying a hand on his shoulder. Kilua stopped, and the screen flashed in an eerie silence, as they both jerked back roughly and fell to the ground, Kilua's shadow continuing down the lit hallway. The only sound that could be heard was the motor of the blimp, quietly whirring. A stunned silence, that seemed to be louder than anything they've heard, filled their ears. Shaken and confused looks were strewn across the faces of the hero students. "What?" a voice said, filled with fear. Kilua's hand, which transformed, veins all along his fingers, nails sharp and piercing, was up. In the background, like the two applicants on the floor, with blood smeared. "If I hadn't stopped then, I would have wanted that ball enough to kill that old man for it," Kilua reflected, a deadly look in his eyes as he continued walking, a cold smirk on his face. Aizawa's eyes were fixed wide open, his teeth grinding into each other painfully. His stomach dropped with the feeling that he had somehow failed. "Be rational. You didn't even know an entire other world existed until mere hours ago," the pro-hero thought. "No way, right? D, are we missing something?" Mina stuttered, voice pitching. "He killed them," Endeavor said, expression hard. Almost as if a wave of ice passed through the crowd, the students went stiff again, disbelieving. "What the hell, catface?" Bakugo thought with a smoldering expression. Netero was face to face with Gon, who stood with his arms open. Gon swiped at him, hard and fast, attempting to seize the ball. Netero dodged his attempts, bending and twisting as he constantly moved the ball from where he was holding it. Netero's eyes squinted before he jumped back, as Gon moved faster than ever, leaving faint afterimages behind him. "Ah, so he's able to increase his speed more," Netero thought. Gon darted around at incredible speed, never staying in one place for more than a second, face scrunched in concentration. The scene went practically unnoticed, the room exploding into chatter. "Please." It became quiet, the screen paused. "There will be enough time afterwards, let's try to continue, yes?" No one said a word, as the room remained quiet in a silent enough agreement. The screen continued onwards. His hand came up to reach for the ball, and Netero's eye widened. "Here it comes. He'll feint for the ball but attack my stomach," Netero interpreted. Gon's foot propelled off the ground, as he went head first towards Netero. The elder grunted and tensed, as Gon headbutted him in the stomach with an impactful sound. "Oh ouch." Gon gritted out, eyes watering from the hit. Netero watched him with contemplative eyes. Gon got back on his feet and without another moment's notice, he readied himself once more. Again. He shouted, using both feet to headbutt Netero once more. "Guess he's really putting the meaning to try again," Mirio said, his tone filled with fake optimism. Tamaki turned to look at him and smiled gently, glad that his friend was attempting to cheer up the tense atmosphere. If he headbutts me in the stomach again, he'll shatter his skull, Netero realized. Gon's face was stubborn and determined as he headed directly towards Netero. But if I relax my stomach, I'll be the one hurting. Netero watched, thinking silently to himself before humming. He jumped up, out of the way, and his right hand pushed Gon forward, sending him right towards the wall behind them. I'll dodge, Netero reasoned. Gon butted into the wall, fingers scrunched as he cringed from the impact. Izuku felt a spark in his mind, feeling as if he was missing something. The green-haired boy pondered for a bit before jumping a little. He did it, Izuku said aloud. The class turned to him, eyes questioning. Netero landed on his feet gracefully, turning to look at the young boy. The wall, where Gon had hit, dented and crumbled, a gray spot left behind. The green-haired boy lay on the ground unmoving. Is he dead? Netero said, slightly startled. Gon began to twitch, pulling himself upwards with a great amount of effort. He sat on his knees, hands in his lap as he broke out into a wide innocent grin, a big red spot on his forehead. A couple of the students still sporting troubled expressions, softened at Gon's smile. Gon really is adorable, Jiru said, sighing softly. Netero's eyes widened, wondering why the boy seemed happy. You just used your right hand, didn't you? Exclamation mark. Gon asked him brightly. Netero, shocked, seemed to realize and went to look at his right hand. He grunted in confirmation, surprised. Gon's smile seemed to grow even wider as he cheesed, before whooping out an excited, I did it. His arms and legs were both up in the air as he cheered, tilting over slightly. Netero watched him mutely. Yahoo! He cried out enthusiastically, falling back with a close-eyed smile. Present Mike let out a soft laugh, eyes becoming distant as he thought about a long-lost friend whose smile radiated as brightly as Gon's. Oboro, he thought longingly, before shaking himself out of it. He didn't beat the game, but he won at something, didn't he? Midnight smiled. His voice died out, and he flopped on the ground starfish style. A moment passed and snores could be heard from the young boy as he slept, mouth open in a smile. Netero's eyes softened and he turned to look at the clock, the hour hand on 5. Hello, is this the pilot? It's me. How's the flight going? Netero said, his back turned, a phone to his ear. I see. I'm sorry to ruin it for you since it's going so smoothly, Netero continued, turning around to look at Gon. Gon, who was on the ground dozing away, the red spot on his head having turned into a bump. But could you fly a little slower? Netero asked. The blimp could be seen better, as the sky began to lighten, night shifting to day. Aizawa watched, before blinking minutely, sighing heavily, his hand rubbing the bridge of his nose. God, these children, I already have my own brats to worry about, he thought. Aizawa stopped in his thoughts, realizing he thought of the class as his own. Must be age catching up to me, the tired pro-hero thought. Hagakure sniffled wetly. That was so nice of him. Quote. In the back, Toga and Twice both fake gagged, pretending to keel over. During the game Netero proposed to kill time. He sensed something in Gon. The airship moved over mountains, the sun beginning to peek over them. The airship and the 42 applicants approached the site of the exam's third phase. The screen abruptly turned black, plunging the room into darkness temporarily before the light came on. A few moments of silence lingered, the air heavy with unspoken thoughts. Kahlua, Momo muttered, thinking about the young boy. Assassins? And then those two applicants, Uraraka said, her eyes watering, as the death count of the exams rose up by 2 more. I don't blame him for it. The class turned to look at Izuku, who had a firm look on his face, eyes solid. What? Midoriya, there's no possible way that you think in any way Killua was justified in… Iida began, his voice steadily rising before he was cut off. No. I mean, Midoriya began, his lips pressing together tightly before he took a deep breath. He shouldn't have killed those 2 applicants. It was horrible and disgusting. But I know what you're all thinking. That Killua is evil. A villain. A confused uncertainty rose between the students. Bakugo remained silent, expression unreadable. I wouldn't say villain, since that's not really a thing in their world, but Jiru trailed off. Killua, if what he said was true, about his family and being assassins, it's not fair to label him as evil, if he's grown up to know nothing but evil, Izuku pushed. The class murmured, unsteady about what Midoriya was saying. I don't see your point, Todoroki quietly said. The dual-quirked boy thought back to Killua's reveal, on how he was his family's expected heir. It's hard for one to know anything else, when you've been tunnel-visioned your entire life, he added. So what, he should just go free? I mean he is anyway, Mina said frustrated. No. I'm just trying to say, maybe Killua needs someone to save him. From himself, Midoriya said. The class was silent for a moment, as they thought over Izuku's bold words. And my family has really high hopes for me, but I can't stand it. The sentence repeated over and over in Bakugo's head, and he couldn't help but wonder. Plot twist of the century. Who knew that scrawny kid was so hardcore? Gon's got competition for being the cutest. Toga giggled, her pupils dilating as she remembered the traces of blood on Killua's hand. Ooh, I wish I could meet him, so he could teach me how to stab people with my hands. Quote. Pipe down, Toga, Shigaraki growled, scratching his neck harder in irritation. Dabi seemed to be lost in thought, the young villain's quirk threatening to flare out, as the seat under him smoldered and sizzled. His eyes landed on Shoto, who was in the midst of the hero class, face stony but his eyes open as the rest of the students talked around him. They shifted over to Endeavor, the heavy-muscled man that seemed to be larger than life sitting with his arms crossed, eyes unforgiving and cold, despite his quirk burning all around him. The villain remained silent and pensive, closing his eyes, as he forced his quirk to calm itself. The screen flickered, as chatter died down, their attention drawn forward once more. Unfortunately, this part is over. I hope you enjoyed it. My apologies for all those quotes. Please have a good morning, afternoon, evening or night. See you next time, faves.